Captain Sarah Phoenix Reynolds stood on the tarmac at 0500 hours, watching maintenance crews chain down every aircraft on Falcon Ridge Air Base, knowing that in 12 hours she'd be the only pilot in the sky when everyone else had been grounded. The emergency lockdown order had come through at midnight, but Sarah had already made her decision 3 hours earlier when the distress signal first crackled through her radio. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The base stretched out before her in the pre-dawn darkness, a sprawling complex of hangars and runways carved into the Nevada desert. Falcon Ridge had been her home for 18 months, and in that time, Sarah had watched more talented pilots than she could count, get promoted, get recognition, get the missions that mattered. At 28, she was older than most captains, her path to the cockpit having taken detours that her male colleagues never faced. She'd started as an enlisted mechanic, working her way through night school and flight training, while others went straight from the academy to pilot seats. The other pilots called her Grease Monkey behind her back, a reference to her enlisted background that they thought she didn't know about. They respected her technical knowledge grudgingly, the way you might appreciate a very talented mechanic, but they never quite saw her as one of them. She was the pilot they called when something was wrong with an aircraft, the one who could diagnose engine problems by sound alone, the one who knew every bolt and wire in the planes she flew. But when it came to the prestigious missions, the career-making deployments, the assignments that led to advancement, Sarah found herself perpetually on the backup list. Colonel Marcus Webb, the wing commander, had made his position clear during her last performance review. "Reynolds, you're technically proficient," he'd said, not looking up from her file. "Your maintenance background gives you an edge in aircraft systems knowledge. But flying isn't just about knowing how the machine works. It's about instinct, about split-second decision-making under pressure. The kind of instincts that come from a lifetime of aviation, not from crawling around in engine compartments." Sarah had wanted to remind him that she'd logged more combat hours than half the pilots he favored, that her instincts had saved 2 different aircraft from catastrophic mechanical failure, that her background had taught her to think 3 steps ahead of any potential problem. Instead, she'd nodded and accepted another assignment to transport duty, ferrying supplies and personnel, while others flew the missions that would define their careers. The pattern had become predictable. When Squadron Leader Jake Viper Morrison needed someone to back up his reconnaissance flights, he chose Lieutenant Thompson, fresh from flight school but carrying the right pedigree. When Captain Williams got selected for the multinational training exercise in Germany, he recommended his wingman Carter, whose father had been a general and whose connections ran deep through the military hierarchy. Sarah's name never came up for these opportunities, not because she lacked skill, but because she lacked the background that opened doors. "Reynolds just doesn't have the killer instinct," she'd overheard Morrison telling Thompson during a briefing last month. "She's too methodical, too careful. When you're in a dogfight, you don't have time to think about engine specifications. You need pilots who react on pure instinct, who've been breathing aviation since they were kids." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. Her methodical approach, her deep understanding of aircraft systems, her careful preparation for every scenario, these were seen as weaknesses rather than strengths. The fact that she could keep a damaged aircraft flying when others would have ejected, that she could navigate by instruments alone when GPS failed, that she could land on a damaged runway in 0 visibility, these skills were dismissed as mechanical aptitude rather than piloting excellence. What her colleagues didn't know was that Sarah had been preparing for exactly this moment for over a year. Every night after her official duties ended, she studied classified mission reports, analyzed flight patterns in hostile territories, and memorized the specifications of aircraft that weren't part of her regular assignments. She'd taught herself to fly every plane on the base, not just the transport aircraft she was usually assigned to. She knew the fuel consumption rates, the maximum payload capacities, and the operational limits of fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance planes that she'd never been officially cleared to pilot. Her quarters were filled with technical manuals that she'd acquired through unofficial channels, maintenance logs that she'd copied during her off-duty hours, and detailed maps of regions where she'd never been deployed. Sarah had learned that opportunity rarely announced itself, so she'd made herself ready for possibilities that might never come. Her fellow pilots saw obsessive studying. Sarah saw preparation for the moment when all their assumptions about her capabilities would be tested. The grounding order had come as a shock to everyone except Sarah. Intelligence reports suggested that a major terrorist cell had acquired surface-to-air missiles and was planning to target military aircraft. Until the threat could be neutralized, all flights were suspended indefinitely. The decision had been made at the highest levels of command, with no exceptions for any mission short of nuclear war. Even training flights were canceled, leaving Falcon Ridge's runways empty for the first time in decades. But 30 miles southeast of the base, Marine Sergeant Lisa Chen and her reconnaissance team were pinned down in a canyon, surrounded by hostiles and running out of ammunition. Their emergency beacon had been transmitting for 6 hours, and satellite imagery showed enemy forces closing in from 3 directions. The extraction point was in a narrow valley that required precision flying and intimate knowledge of the terrain. The mission was complicated by the fact that the area was exactly where intelligence suspected the new missile systems were located. Colonel Webb had spent the morning on conference calls with Pentagon officials, trying to get authorization for a rescue mission that everyone agreed was necessary, but no one was willing to approve. The political ramifications of losing an aircraft to the new missiles were considered too great, the risk to pilot and crew too high for anything short of a guaranteed success mission. While bureaucrats debated policy, Chen and her team were fighting for their lives with dwindling supplies and no hope of reinforcement. Sarah had listened to the command center communications through her maintenance radio, hearing the frustration in Webb's voice as he explained again and again why they couldn't mount a rescue operation. She'd studied the terrain maps of Chen's location, calculated fuel requirements and flight paths, and realized that she was probably the only pilot on base who could navigate the canyon system in the modified transport helicopter that would be needed for extraction. Her mechanical background had taught her that the UH-60 Blackhawk in Hangar 7 could be modified for low-altitude operations in restricted terrain. The aircraft was officially grounded like all others, but Sarah knew it was fully fueled and mission-ready. More importantly, she knew that its maintenance logs showed modifications she'd personally supervised that made it ideal for exactly this type of operation. As maintenance crews continued securing aircraft across the base, Sarah made a decision that would either end her career or define it. Chen's team had maybe 6 hours before their position became untenable. The bureaucrats would debate for 12 hours before reaching any decision, and by then, it would be too late for anything except recovering bodies. Sarah walked back toward the hangars, her mind already calculating flight paths and fuel loads. In her quarters, she had detailed maps of the extraction zone and a thorough understanding of the aircraft that could reach it. She had the skills to fly a mission that everyone else considered impossible, and the motivation to risk everything for fellow soldiers who were counting on someone to ignore orders and do what was right. The sun was rising over the Nevada desert, beginning what would either be her last day as a military pilot or the day she proved that background mattered less than capability. Sarah checked her watch and began planning a mission that officially didn't exist, to save people that officially couldn't be reached, in an aircraft that officially couldn't fly. Sarah's unofficial education had begun 14 months ago in the forgotten corners of Falcon Ridge's technical library. While other pilots spent their off-duty hours at the officers' club or playing video games in the recreation center, Sarah haunted the dusty archives where decades of flight manuals, classified after-action reports, and technical specifications gathered dust on metal shelves. The librarian, Chief Warrant Officer Martinez, had stopped questioning her presence after the 3rd week, simply nodding when Sarah appeared each evening with a thermos of coffee and a notebook already half filled with technical diagrams. The Blackhawk modification project had started as intellectual curiosity. Sarah had noticed discrepancies in the maintenance logs for several UH-60s that suggested unauthorized modifications were being tested and quietly implemented. Following the paper trail through requisition forms and work orders, she discovered that the base was unofficially serving as a testing ground for enhanced low-altitude navigation systems and terrain-following radar upgrades that weren't in any official manual. Her mechanical background made her uniquely qualified to understand these modifications. Where other pilots saw incomprehensible technical specifications, Sarah saw elegant solutions to complex flight problems. The enhanced terrain-following radar could map canyon walls in real time, creating 3-dimensional flight paths through narrow passages that would be invisible to standard navigation systems. The modified rotor assemblies reduced noise signatures by 40%, making low-altitude operations significantly more stealthy. Sarah had reverse-engineered the entire modification process by studying maintenance records, parts requisitions, and performance data that previous mechanics had filed without understanding their significance. She knew that Hangar 7's Black Hawk had received all the experimental upgrades, making it essentially a prototype for a new generation of special operations aircraft. The modifications weren't classified exactly, but they weren't officially acknowledged either, existing in the gray area where military innovation happened without bureaucratic oversight. Her grandmother's influence had shaped Sarah's approach to learning in ways that her fellow pilots couldn't understand. Elena Reynolds had been a ferry pilot during World War II, one of the women Air Force service pilots who delivered military aircraft across dangerous routes while male pilots fought overseas. Elena had taught Sarah that aviation wasn't just about flying, it was about understanding every system, every limitation, every possibility that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Elena's stories had filled Sarah's childhood with accounts of flying damaged aircraft through storms, navigating by dead reckoning when instruments failed, and landing on improvised airstrips that existed only on hand-drawn maps. These weren't the sanitized heroics that filled official histories, but the practical skills that kept pilots alive when everything went wrong. Elena had emphasized that the best pilots weren't necessarily the most naturally gifted, but the ones who prepared for scenarios that others couldn't imagine. Following Elena's example, Sarah had created her own comprehensive training program that extended far beyond official requirements. She'd learned to fly every aircraft on the base through a combination of simulator time, maintenance access, and unofficial training sessions, with mechanics who appreciated her technical knowledge. While other pilots specialized in single aircraft types, Sarah had made herself proficient in fighters, transports, helicopters, and even the experimental drones that officially didn't exist in their inventory. Her language skills had developed from pure necessity. Sarah had taught herself Arabic, Pashto, and Mandarin during her enlisted years, recognizing that global deployments would require communication abilities that weren't emphasized in pilot training. She had studied regional geography with the intensity of a doctoral candidate, memorizing terrain features, weather patterns, and cultural considerations for every area where American forces operated. Her quarters contained maps, marked with her own annotations, noting everything from seasonal wind patterns to local political dynamics that could affect military operations. The canyon systems of the American Southwest had become Sarah's particular specialty after she'd realized that much of the world's difficult terrain shared similar characteristics. She'd spent weekends hiking and climbing in areas that resembled the landscapes where military operations typically occurred, developing an intuitive understanding of how air currents behaved in narrow valleys, how visual references changed with altitude, and how mechanical systems performed under the stress of extreme terrain navigation. Her maintenance background had taught her to think like an aircraft rather than just a pilot. Sarah understood how engines responded to different fuel mixtures at varying altitudes, how hydraulic systems behaved under sustained G-forces, and how avionics systems could be coaxed to perform beyond their design parameters when missions demanded exceptional performance. This knowledge wasn't theoretical. She'd personally worked on every type of aircraft malfunction that could occur, giving her confidence to push aircraft to their limits when necessary. The unofficial flight testing had begun 6 months ago, when Sarah realized that book knowledge needed practical application. During routine maintenance flights, she'd gradually pushed aircraft performance envelopes, testing how the modified Black Hawks responded to extreme maneuvering, how their enhanced systems performed under stress, and how their noise reduction modifications affected flight characteristics. These tests were conducted during legitimate maintenance check flights, but Sarah had systematically explored capabilities that weren't part of standard procedures. Her network of enlisted personnel had provided access to information and opportunities that officers rarely received. Mechanics, technicians, and support staff appreciated Sarah's respect for their expertise and her willingness to learn from their practical experience. They'd shared insights about aircraft performance, modification effects, and operational limitations that weren't documented in official manuals. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez had taught her advanced navigation techniques that relied on terrain recognition rather than GPS systems. Staff Sergeant Kim had shown her how to optimize fuel consumption for extended-range operations that weren't part of standard mission profiles. The intelligence gathering had been perhaps the most challenging aspect of Sarah's preparation. Military intelligence wasn't typically shared with transport pilots, But Sarah had cultivated relationships with intelligence analysts who valued her technical insights about aircraft capabilities and limitations. She'd studied threat assessments, enemy capabilities, and operational environments with the thoroughness of someone planning actual missions rather than theoretical exercises. Sarah's physical conditioning program had focused specifically on the demands of extreme flying operations. While other pilots maintained standard fitness requirements, Sarah had trained for scenarios that might require sustained high-G maneuvering, extended flight operations under stress, and the physical demands of flying damaged or compromised aircraft. She'd studied combat medicine, learning to treat injuries that could occur during high-risk operations, and practiced emergency procedures that went far beyond standard training requirements. The psychological preparation had been equally important. Sarah had studied accounts of pilots who'd performed extraordinary missions under extreme pressure, analyzing their decision-making processes and mental preparation techniques. She developed visualization exercises that allowed her to mentally rehearse complex missions, working through contingencies and emergency procedures until they became automatic responses rather than conscious decisions. Her ammunition in this unofficial war of preparation was knowledge that others didn't possess, and capabilities that others didn't recognize. While her fellow pilots saw her studying as academic obsession, Sarah was building a comprehensive skill set that would allow her to accomplish missions that others would consider impossible. She'd made herself into a specialized tool designed for exactly the type of operation that Chen's rescue would require. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that her most valuable qualifications were precisely the ones that others dismissed as irrelevant to modern aviation. Her mechanical background, her methodical approach to problem-solving, her comprehensive preparation for scenarios that might never occur, these were seen as signs that she wasn't a natural pilot. Sarah had learned to hide her capabilities, allowing others to underestimate her, while she quietly prepared for the moment when unconventional skills would become essential for mission success. The pattern had crystallized during the Crimson Eagle exercise 8 months ago, when Sarah watched from the sidelines as less experienced pilots were selected for the multinational training operation that would define careers for years to come. She'd submitted her application with meticulous documentation of her qualifications, her technical expertise, and her unique skill set that included maintenance knowledge no other pilot possessed. The response had been a form letter thanking her for her interest and suggesting she focus on her current transport assignments. Lieutenant David Hawk Patterson, who'd graduated flight school 6 months after Sarah's commission, had been selected as Morrison's wingman for the exercise. Patterson's flight logs showed half of Sarah's combat hours and none of her technical training, but his father was Admiral Patterson of the Pacific Fleet, and his recommendations came from generals who played golf together at exclusive military clubs. Sarah had watched the selection announcement from the back of the briefing room, her jaw clenched as Patterson accepted congratulations from officers who'd never bothered to learn her first name. The exclusion from Operation Desert Shield's reconnaissance mission had stung even more deeply. Sarah had spent 3 weeks preparing a comprehensive brief on optimal flight paths through the region's challenging terrain, including detailed analysis of weather patterns, fuel requirements, and potential emergency landing sites. Her presentation had been thorough enough to serve as the mission's operational foundation, but when Colonel Webb announced the pilot assignments, Sarah's name was conspicuously absent from the roster. Captain Bradley Storm Williams had been selected as mission commander despite having never flown in desert conditions. His qualifications included graduating second in his flight class and completing advanced training at the Navy's elite fighter school. But Sarah knew the terrain they'd be flying better than anyone on the base. She'd studied satellite imagery for months, memorizing every ridge and valley, every potential hazard and opportunity that could affect mission success. "Reynolds, your technical analysis was excellent," Webb had told her after the briefing, his tone suggesting he was offering compensation for disappointment. "Williams will be using your flight path recommendations and terrain assessments. Your contribution to mission planning has been invaluable." Invaluable but invisible, Sarah had thought, watching Williams receive briefings based on her research while she was assigned to ferry replacement parts to a supply depot in Arizona. Her work would enable the mission's success, but Williams would receive credit for its completion. The pattern was becoming too familiar to ignore. The conversation she'd overheard in the officers' mess 3 weeks later had crystallized her understanding of how others truly perceived her. Morrison and Williams were discussing upcoming assignments over coffee, their voices carrying across the nearly empty dining room where Sarah sat alone with a technical manual and a sandwich. "Webb's really pushing diversity initiatives lately," Morrison had said, his tone suggesting mild annoyance. "I heard he's considering Reynolds for the NATO exchange program." Williams had laughed, not maliciously but with the casual dismissal of someone discussing an amusing impossibility. "Phoenix? Come on, Morrison. She's solid for transport and maintenance consultation. But can you imagine her representing American aviation to European allies? She'd spend the whole exchange explaining engine specifications instead of demonstrating air superiority." "That's exactly what I told Webb," Morrison had replied. "Reynolds is brilliant with technical stuff, but she doesn't have the presence for international operations. The Europeans expect pilots who embody American aviation excellence, not mechanics who learn to fly." Sarah had continued reading her manual, her expression unchanged, but the words had burned like acid. Mechanics who learn to fly. As if her path to the cockpit somehow invalidated her qualifications. As if understanding how aircraft actually worked made her less capable of flying them effectively. The NATO exchange program had gone to Captain Jennifer Blade Torres, whose qualifications included graduating from the Air Force Academy and completing advanced training in air-to-air combat. Torres was undeniably skilled, but she'd never flown the modified aircraft that made up most of NATO's Special Operations Fleet, and she'd never worked on the maintenance issues that frequently grounded international training exercises. Sarah's comprehensive understanding of multiple aircraft systems would have made her invaluable for international cooperation, but those qualifications were apparently less important than having the right educational pedigree. The breaking point had come during the emergency response training exercise that had tested the base's readiness for complex rescue operations. Sarah had volunteered to participate in the scenario planning, offering insights based on her study of similar real-world operations. Her suggestions had been noted and filed, but when the actual exercise began, she'd been assigned to communications support while pilots with half her experience flew the simulated missions. Captain Ace Thompson, fresh from advanced flight training and eager to prove himself, had been selected to lead the most challenging rescue scenario despite having never flown in mountainous terrain. Sarah had watched from the command center as Thompson struggled with navigation problems she could have solved immediately, as he made tactical decisions that violated basic principles of terrain flying that she'd mastered years ago. The exercise had been a disaster. Thompson's inexperience with low-altitude operations had resulted in simulated crashes that would have been fatal in real conditions. His inability to navigate without GPS had compromised the entire mission when electronic systems were simulated as disabled. The after-action report had been diplomatically worded, but the conclusion was clear. The base's pilots weren't prepared for the complex operations they might be called upon to execute. Sarah had submitted a detailed analysis of the exercise failures, including specific recommendations for improved training and equipment modifications that could prevent similar problems in actual operations. Her report had been acknowledged and filed, but when the new training protocols were announced, they were based on suggestions from an expensive civilian consulting firm rather than her practical experience. The frustration had been compounded by watching colleagues receive promotions and recognition for achievements that built upon Sarah's uncredited work. Williams had been commended for innovative navigation techniques that were based entirely on Sarah's terrain analysis. Pedersen had received recognition for aircraft maintenance insights that came from conversations with Sarah during routine operations. Torres had been praised for technical knowledge that she'd acquired through informal discussions with Sarah in the hangar bay. Even the base's senior non-commissioned officers, who generally respected competence regardless of background, had begun to treat Sarah differently as the pattern of exclusion became apparent. Chief Master Sergeant Davis, who'd initially appreciated Sarah's technical expertise, had started directing maintenance questions to other pilots, apparently concluding that Sarah's knowledge wasn't valued by the command structure. The social isolation had been perhaps the most difficult aspect of the systematic exclusion. Sarah's quarters in the officers' housing had become a refuge where she could study and prepare without enduring the casual dismissals and polite condescension that characterized most of her professional interactions. She'd stopped attending unit social events after realizing that her presence made others uncomfortable, as if her different background somehow challenged their assumptions about military aviation culture. Her relationship with fellow female officers had been complicated by their apparent belief that Sarah's technical approach to flying somehow reflected poorly on women pilots in general. Captain Martinez, one of only 3 other women pilots on base, had actually suggested that Sarah should try to be more instinctive in her flying approach, as if her methodical preparation was a gender-related weakness that needed correction. The final insult had come 2 months ago, when Sarah's name had been removed from the qualified pilot roster for a humanitarian mission to earthquake-stricken regions of Central America. Her Spanish language skills and her familiarity with relief operations would have made her ideal for the assignment, but Colonel Webb had explained that the mission required pilots with demonstrated leadership experience in international operations. The leadership experience requirement was a new qualification that had never been mentioned for previous international assignments, and Sarah suspected it had been created specifically to exclude her from opportunities that might lead to the advancement she'd been systematically denied. She'd watched from the base's pilots with less experience and fewer relevant qualifications departed for a mission that could have been a career-defining opportunity. The emergency klaxon shattered the pre-dawn quiet at 0347 hours, its harsh electronic wail cutting through the desert air like a serrated blade. Sarah bolted upright in her quarters, instantly alert, despite having been awake for only 3 hours after studying navigation charts until well past midnight. The klaxon's specific pattern indicated a priority alpha emergency, the highest classification reserved for imminent threats to American personnel in hostile territory. She pulled on her flight suit and boots with practiced efficiency, her mind already processing the implications. Priority alpha emergencies bypassed normal command structures, requiring immediate response regardless of standing orders or operational restrictions. Sarah had memorized the emergency protocols during her extensive study of military regulations, understanding that such situations created opportunities for unconventional solutions when conventional approaches failed. The base communication center buzzed with controlled chaos as Sarah arrived, personnel manning radio stations and satellite communication arrays with the focused intensity of professionals managing a life-or-death crisis. Through the cacophony of overlapping transmissions, she caught fragments of reports that painted a grim picture of Marines under fire in terrain that would challenge even the most experienced rescue pilots. Staff Sergeant Kim approached her with a clipboard and a grim expression that Sarah had learned to associate with missions that pushed operational limits. "Captain Reynolds, we need you in Communications Bay 3. There's been a development in the Chen situation that requires technical consultation." The Chen situation had been developing for 18 hours, beginning when Marine Reconnaissance Team Bravo had missed their scheduled check-in during an intelligence-gathering operation near the Pakistani border. Satellite surveillance had located their position in a narrow canyon system approximately 30 miles southeast of the base, surrounded by hostile forces that intelligence estimated at company strength or larger. Communications Bay 3 contained the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering equipment on the base, arrays of monitors displaying real-time satellite feeds, intercepted communications, and tactical analysis that normally remained classified far above Sarah's clearance level. The fact that she was being briefed on this information indicated how desperate the situation had become. Colonel Webb stood at the center of the organized chaos, his weathered face reflecting the strain of managing a crisis that had no good solutions. Around him, intelligence analysts worked frantically to process incoming data, while communications specialists attempted to maintain contact with Chen's team through increasingly intermittent radio transmissions. "Reynolds," Webb said without looking up from the tactical display, "I need your assessment of extraction possibilities given current weather conditions and terrain limitations. The canyon system where Chen is pinned down requires flying through a corridor no more than 50 meters wide in some sections, with crosswinds that could exceed operational limits for standard rescue operations." Sarah studied the satellite imagery on the main display, her mind automatically calculating flight paths, fuel requirements, and aircraft performance parameters for the challenging terrain. The canyon walls rose nearly vertical for over 800 feet, creating a natural funnel that would amplify wind effects and eliminate most margin for navigational error. Standard rescue protocols would be insufficient for this environment. "Sir, the terrain requires specialized low-altitude navigation capabilities and enhanced terrain-following radar to maintain safe flight paths," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her growing understanding of the mission's complexity. "The UH-60 in Hangar 7 has been modified with systems that could handle these conditions, but the operation would require a pilot with extensive experience in extreme terrain navigation." "Heidel, Webb's expression darkened as he absorbed the implications of her assessment. The Hangar 7 aircraft is grounded along with every other bird on this base. We have standing orders from CENTCOM that no aircraft launches until the surface-to-air missile threat is neutralized. The surface-to-air missile intelligence had been updated throughout the night, revealing a threat more sophisticated and widespread than initially assessed. Terrorist organizations had acquired Russian-made SA-24 missiles capable of engaging targets at altitudes up to 19,000 feet, effectively creating a no-fly zone across the entire operational area. The missiles' heat-seeking guidance systems made them particularly dangerous to helicopter operations, which typically relied on low-altitude flight paths for tactical advantage. Major Patricia Iron Johnson, the base intelligence officer, approached with a folder of classified documents that she handed to Webb with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we've received updated intelligence on Chen's situation. Enemy forces are moving additional personnel into the area, including what appears to be heavy weapons, that could make ground extraction impossible within the next 12 hours. Sarah reviewed the tactical situation with growing alarm as details emerged through briefings and overheard communications. Chen's 4-person reconnaissance team had been compromised during what should have been a routine intelligence-gathering mission, forcing them to take defensive positions in a canyon that provided excellent cover but limited escape routes. Their initial emergency beacon had indicated injuries among team members, but communications had been sporadic due to terrain interference and the need to maintain radio silence during enemy movement. The political implications of the crisis were becoming clear through fragments of conversations between Webb and his superiors at higher command levels. The reconnaissance mission had been part of a classified operation to gather intelligence on terrorist activities near the Pakistani border, an area where American military presence was politically sensitive. Any rescue operation would need to be completed quickly and quietly to avoid international complications that could affect broader strategic relationships. Captain Morrison approached Sarah with a tactical radio and headset, his expression reflecting the frustration that had been building throughout the command center as conventional solutions proved inadequate. "Reynolds, Chen's team leader is requesting immediate extraction. They're reporting at least 2 wounded, ammunition running low, and enemy forces advancing from multiple directions." Through the headset, Sarah could hear Chen's voice transmitting in short, controlled bursts designed to minimize detection by enemy forces. The Marine sergeant's reports painted a picture of professional soldiers managing an increasingly desperate situation with the calm competence that characterized elite military units under extreme pressure. "Base, this is Recon Bravo, enemy contact increasing. Request immediate extraction. 2 team members require medical attention. Current position sustainable for approximately 6 hours maximum. Over." Webb's response reflected the impossible situation facing Base Command. "Recon Bravo, be advised all aircraft currently grounded due to confirmed SAM threat in your operational area. Working alternative extraction methods. Maintain current position and await further instructions. Over." The silence that followed Chen's acknowledgement spoke volumes about the reality facing her team. Alternative extraction methods meant ground-based rescue operations that would take hours to organize and execute, time that Chen's team didn't have. The Marines were professionals who understood military realities, but they were also human beings facing death while their colleagues debated bureaucratic obstacles to saving their lives. Sarah studied the tactical displays with growing conviction that conventional approaches would fail to reach Chen's team in time. The surface-to-air missile threat was real and significant, but it wasn't insurmountable for an aircraft equipped with appropriate countermeasures and flown by a pilot who understood how to use terrain masking and low-altitude flight paths to avoid missile engagement envelopes. The enhanced navigation systems in Hangar 7's modified Black Hawk were specifically designed for operations in exactly this type of environment. The terrain following radar could map safe flight paths through the canyon system, while the reduced noise signature would make detection by enemy forces significantly more difficult. Most importantly, Sarah understood the aircraft's capabilities and limitations better than any other pilot on the base. Intelligence updates continued to worsen the tactical situation. Enemy forces were estimated at over 200 personnel, significantly larger than the small terrorist cell that intelligence had initially suspected. The presence of heavy weapons suggested a well-organized military operation rather than the opportunistic ambush that had been assumed. Chen's team was facing a coordinated assault by professional soldiers with substantial tactical advantages. Webb's frustration was becoming visible as he coordinated with higher command levels, seeking authorization for rescue operations that everyone understood were necessary, but no one was willing to approve. Political considerations, operational security, and risk management protocols were creating bureaucratic obstacles that could prove fatal to Marines who needed immediate extraction. Sarah realized that while officials debated policy and procedures, Chen's team was fighting for survival with diminishing resources and increasing enemy pressure. The gap between military necessity and administrative approval was measured in hours that the Marines didn't have, creating a situation where unauthorized action might be the only option for saving American lives. Colonel Webb's voice carried across the command center with the weight of absolute authority as he addressed the assembled personnel, his weathered features reflecting the burden of making decisions that would determine whether Marines lived or died. I want to be crystal clear about the current operational status. CENTCOM has issued explicit orders that no aircraft launches from this base until the SAM threat is neutralized. That order comes directly from General Patterson at Central Command and carries the full authority of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The assembled officers and senior enlisted personnel absorbed the finality of Webb's statement with the disciplined silence of military professionals who understood that some orders admitted no interpretation or flexibility. Sarah stood near the back of the briefing room, her mind racing through calculations of flight times, fuel requirements, and tactical approaches, while Webb continued his explanation of why Chen's team would have to wait for solutions that might come too late. The intelligence assessment confirms at least 12 SA-24 missile systems in the operational area, Webb continued, pointing to red markers on the tactical display that showed estimated enemy positions. These systems have a proven track record against military aircraft, including successful engagements of helicopters at low altitude. The risk assessment indicates a near certainty of aircraft loss for any rescue attempt under current conditions. Major Johnson stepped forward with additional intelligence reports that painted an even grimmer picture of the tactical situation. Sir, intercepted communications suggest that enemy forces are specifically targeting our aircraft. They appear to be using Chen's team as bait to draw our rescue assets into missile engagement zones. Any extraction attempt would be flying directly into a prepared ambush. The political ramifications were equally discouraging, as Webb explained during a sidebar conversation with his senior staff that Sarah overheard from her position near the communications equipment. The Pakistani government had been notified of American military activity in the border region, but had not granted explicit permission for air operations. Any aircraft shot down during an unauthorized rescue mission could create an international incident that would affect strategic relationships throughout Central Asia. Captain Williams approached Webb with a tactical assessment that reflected the conventional military thinking that dominated command decisions. Sir, I've analyzed possible rescue scenarios using our available aircraft and personnel. Even with our most experienced pilots and best-equipped helicopters, the probability of successful extraction is less than 30%. The probability of losing aircraft and aircrew is over 70%. Sarah's jaw tightened as she listened to Williams dismiss the rescue mission as tactically unfeasible, his analysis based on standard operational procedures that didn't account for the specialized capabilities of the modified aircraft in Hangar 7. Williams had never flown the enhanced terrain-following radar systems, had never tested the noise reduction modifications, and had never practiced the low-altitude navigation techniques that could make the mission possible. Bambly. Morrison joined the discussion with his own assessment of pilot qualifications for extreme rescue operations, his tone suggesting that he was stating obvious facts rather than expressing opinions. Sir, this type of mission requires our most experienced pilots with proven combat records and extensive training in hostile environment operations. We're talking about flying through defended airspace at low altitude, in challenging terrain conditions. The unspoken implication was clear to everyone in the room, including Sarah. Morrison was describing qualifications that officially excluded her from consideration, despite her extensive preparation for exactly this type of operation. Her transport mission experience and maintenance background were seen as disqualifying factors rather than unique advantages for understanding aircraft performance under extreme conditions. Chief Master Sergeant Davis approached Webb with a personnel roster that reflected the base's available pilot assignments, his expression reflecting the frustration of professional military personnel facing an impossible situation. Sir, our most qualified pilots for this type of operation are Thompson, Patterson, and Morrison. All three have completed advanced training in combat rescue operations and have experience with operations in hostile territory. Sarah knew that Thompson's experience consisted of training exercises that bore little resemblance to actual combat conditions, that Patterson's combat record was limited to air-to-air engagements that had never tested his abilities in low-altitude terrain navigation, and that Morrison's rescue training had been conducted in controlled environments with full logistical support. None of them had studied the specific terrain where Chen was trapped, and none of them understood the capabilities of the modified aircraft that could reach her. Webb's response reflected the command structure's assessment of Sarah's qualifications, delivered with the diplomatic language that characterized official exclusions from important missions. Reynolds has technical expertise that makes her valuable for mission planning and aircraft systems consultation, but this operation requires pilots with demonstrated experience in combat rescue operations. Her background in transport and logistics doesn't provide the combat experience necessary for this type of high-risk mission. The dismissal stung with familiar intensity, but Sarah forced herself to maintain professional composure while inwardly cataloging the errors in Webb's assessment. Her transport and logistics experience included flying supply missions through hostile territory where enemy fire was a constant threat, navigating damaged aircraft to emergency landings when standard procedures failed, and maintaining operational capability under stress conditions that would have grounded less prepared pilots. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes from the Inspector General's office provided additional bureaucratic obstacles to any rescue attempt. His concerns focused on the regulatory and legal implications of unauthorized military operations. Sir, any pilot who violates the current flight restrictions would face court-martial proceedings regardless of mission outcome. The CENTCOM grounding order specifically prohibits exceptions for local commander discretion. The legal implications were emphasized by Captain Rodriguez from the base legal office, who outlined the potential consequences for any pilot who chose to ignore direct orders from higher command. Military justice system treats violations of direct orders as serious offenses that can result in dismissal from service, reduction in rank, and potential criminal prosecution. These consequences apply regardless of mission motivation or outcome. Sarah absorbed the warnings with growing conviction that official channels would fail to save Chen's team in time. The bureaucratic and legal obstacles were real and significant, but they were also symptoms of a military system that prioritized risk avoidance over mission accomplishment when political considerations outweighed operational necessity. The final blow came when Webb announced his decision regarding the rescue operation, his tone reflecting the burden of command responsibility in impossible circumstances. Based on current intelligence assessment and operational constraints, I am officially declaring Chen's extraction mission unfeasible under present conditions. We will continue monitoring the situation and maintain readiness for immediate response when authorization is received from higher command. Higher command authorization was a bureaucratic fiction that everyone understood would never come in time to save Chen's team. The political risks were too great, the operational dangers too significant, and the precedent too dangerous for senior officials to approve a mission that violated explicit orders from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Huntress, Sarah watched her colleagues accept Webb's decision with the disciplined resignation of military professionals who understood that orders were orders, regardless of personal feelings about their consequences. Thompson nodded with apparent relief that he wouldn't be asked to fly an impossible mission. Patterson seemed genuinely disappointed but accepted the decision without question. Morrison's expression reflected the frustration of a pilot who wanted to help but understood the limitations imposed by higher authority. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez approached Sarah with a maintenance request that seemed almost surreal given the circumstances. Captain Reynolds, I need you to verify the fuel and systems status for all grounded aircraft. Command wants to ensure full readiness when authorization comes through for rescue operations. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that she was being asked to maintain aircraft that everyone knew would never be authorized for the mission that could save Chen's team. Her mechanical expertise was valued for keeping planes ready for missions she would never be allowed to fly, even when she was the only pilot on base who understood how to accomplish the impossible rescue that everyone agreed was necessary. As the command center began to settle into a holding pattern of monitoring and waiting, Sarah realized that official channels had exhausted their possibilities. Chen's Marines were facing death, while bureaucrats debated procedures, and the aircraft that could reach them sat fueled and ready in a hangar, protected by regulations that valued political safety over human lives. Sarah waited until the base settled into its evening routine, the command center reduced to a skeleton crew monitoring communications, while senior officers attended mandatory briefings about the political implications of unauthorized rescue operations. The grounding order had created an artificial calm across Falcon Ridge, with maintenance crews completing their securing procedures and flight personnel relegated to administrative duties that felt meaningless while Marines died 30 miles away. Her movement through the base required careful timing and intimate knowledge of security protocols that she'd observed during 18 months of transport operations. The motor pool checkpoint operated with reduced staffing after 2,100 hours, manned by a single guard whose attention focused primarily on vehicles entering the base rather than personnel moving between authorized areas. Sarah approached with a maintenance clipboard and the confident stride of someone conducting routine inspections. "Evening, Sergeant Baker," she said to the guard, not slowing her pace as she passed the checkpoint. "Just checking the backup generator fuel levels in Sector 7. Command wants hourly reports until this crisis passes." Baker barely looked up from his paperwork, nodding absently at an explanation that fit perfectly with the increased security measures that had been implemented across the base. Sarah's maintenance vest and official clipboard provided camouflage that made her invisible to guards accustomed to seeing officers conduct technical inspections during heightened alert conditions. The route to Hangar 7 took her through a series of maintenance areas where her presence would appear routine to anyone who noticed her movement. Sarah had mapped this path months earlier, timing herself during practice runs that she'd disguised as legitimate maintenance rounds. She knew which areas had security cameras, which routes were monitored by roving patrols, and which blind spots could conceal unauthorized activity. Hangar 7 sat at the edge of the flight line, its massive doors sealed and secured according to the grounding protocols that had locked down every aircraft on the base. The security measures were designed to prevent terrorist infiltration or sabotage, not to stop authorized personnel from accessing aircraft for legitimate purposes. Sarah's maintenance credentials provided entry to areas that would be restricted to unqualified personnel. The UH-60 Black Hawk dominated the hangar's interior, its modified configuration reflecting months of careful upgrades that had transformed it into a specialized aircraft capable of operations that standard helicopters couldn't attempt. Sarah had personally supervised many of the modifications, understanding their capabilities and limitations better than anyone else on the base. She began her pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision that had characterized her maintenance work since her enlisted days, checking fuel levels, hydraulic systems, and avionics that would determine whether the mission succeeded or failed. The enhanced terrain-following radar showed green status lights across all systems, its sophisticated processors ready to map safe flight paths through terrain that would challenge conventional navigation methods. The noise reduction modifications represented the most significant improvement over standard UH-60 configurations, with modified rotor assemblies and engine dampening systems that reduced acoustic signatures by 40%. These improvements would make low-altitude operations significantly more stealthy, reducing the likelihood of detection by enemy forces who might be listening for approaching aircraft. Sarah's personal equipment had been prepared for weeks, stored in her quarters alongside maps and technical specifications that officially didn't exist in her possession. The survival gear, medical supplies, and communications equipment that she loaded into the aircraft reflected planning that extended far beyond standard mission requirements, anticipating contingencies that could determine mission success. Her flight suit contained modifications that weren't part of standard military equipment, including enhanced navigation aids, emergency medical supplies, and backup communication systems that could maintain contact with rescue teams even if primary systems failed. Sarah had acquired these items through unofficial channels, recognizing that extreme missions required equipment that exceeded normal specifications. The aircraft's fuel load required careful calculation based on the flight profile that Sarah had memorized for Chen's extraction. The route would take her through canyon systems, where fuel consumption would increase due to turbulence and the need for constant maneuvering to avoid terrain obstacles. Sarah topped off the fuel tanks and verified that backup systems were fully charged and operational. The weapons systems presented a moral and legal dilemma that Sarah had anticipated during her mission planning. The Black Hawk was equipped with defensive armaments that could protect the aircraft during extraction operations, but using them would escalate the mission from rescue to combat, with implications that could affect international relations and her own legal standing. Sarah made the decision to arm the aircraft's defensive systems while hoping that their use wouldn't become necessary. The mission's primary objective was rescue, but she understood that protecting Chen's team might require capabilities that went beyond simple extraction. The weapons would remain under her control, used only if enemy action threatened the success of the rescue operation. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Her communication with Chen's team required bypassing normal command channels that would immediately alert base personnel to her unauthorized mission. Sarah used a tactical radio frequency that she'd identified during her study of marine communication protocols, establishing contact without triggering the monitoring systems that tracked official base communications. "Recon Bravo, this is Phoenix 1, Sarah transmitted using the call sign that she'd assigned herself for this operation. "I'm launching for extraction in 15 minutes. Prepare for pickup at your current coordinates. Mark your position with infrared strobes for visual identification." Chen's response reflected the professional calm of a Marine leader who understood that unauthorized rescue was better than no rescue at all. "Phoenix 1, understood. Team ready for extraction. Be advised, enemy activity has increased in the past hour. Approach from the northeast to avoid observed patrol routes." The engine startup sequence followed procedures that Sarah had practiced dozens of times, but the context made every action significant in ways that routine flights never achieved. The enhanced avionics systems came online with status displays that confirmed all modifications were functioning within normal parameters, giving Sarah confidence that the aircraft could perform the demanding mission ahead. Her departure from the hangar required careful timing to avoid detection by security patrols that monitored aircraft areas according to schedules that Sarah had memorized. The base's radar systems would detect her takeoff immediately, but she calculated that reaching Chen's position would take less time than organizing an effective response to stop her mission. The flight path that Sarah had planned would take her below radar coverage for most of the route, using terrain masking to avoid detection by both base monitoring systems and enemy forces that might be tracking aircraft movement in the region. The enhanced terrain-following radar would guide her through mountain passes and canyon systems that conventional navigation couldn't safely navigate. As the Black Hawk lifted off into the desert darkness, Sarah felt the weight of decision that would either end her military career or prove that unconventional thinking could accomplish missions that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. Chen's Marines were counting on someone to ignore orders and regulations in favor of the military's most fundamental obligation, never leaving fellow soldiers behind. The radio crackled with urgent transmissions from base command as her unauthorized departure was detected and reported through official channels. Sarah switched off her response capability, maintaining radio silence that would prevent command from ordering her to return while she flew toward a rescue that officially couldn't happen. Behind her, Falcon Ridge Air Base erupted into controlled chaos as officers realized that one of their pilots had violated direct orders from the highest levels of military command. Ahead of her, Chen's Marines waited in a canyon where enemy forces were closing in, and time was running out for a rescue that could only succeed if conventional rules were abandoned in favor of what was right. The canyon walls rose like ancient fortress battlements on either side of Sarah's flight path, their jagged surfaces carved by millennia of flash floods and wind erosion into a maze of razor-sharp ridges and hidden alcoves that could conceal enemy positions or provide sanctuary for desperate Marines. The enhanced terrain-following radar painted a three-dimensional map of the narrow corridor ahead, its sophisticated processors calculating safe flight paths through passages that would have been impossible to navigate using conventional instruments. Sarah's hands moved across the control systems with practiced precision, adjusting rotor pitch and engine power to maintain optimal flight characteristics in the turbulent air currents that ricochet between canyon walls like invisible pinballs. The modified Black Hawk responded to her inputs with sensitivity that reflected months of careful engineering, its enhanced systems providing feedback that allowed her to push performance envelopes that would have been dangerous in standard aircraft. The infrared strobes appeared as bright pinpricks against the canyon floor, marking Chen's position with electronic beacons that were invisible to human eyes but blazed like signal fires through Sarah's night vision equipment. The Marines had positioned themselves in a natural alcove that provided excellent defensive cover but created challenging extraction geometry that would require precision flying in confined spaces. "Phoenix 1, "We have visual on your approach." Chen's voice crackled through the tactical radio, her professional calm masking what Sarah knew must be enormous relief at seeing rescue arriving when official channels had failed them. "Enemy contact approximately 200 meters southwest of our position. They appear to be setting up heavy weapons that could threaten your extraction." Sarah banked the helicopter into a steep descent that brought her below the canyon rim, using terrain masking to avoid detection by enemy forces while positioning for the extraction that would test every modification and every hour of preparation she'd invested in this moment. The canyon floor rushed up to meet her landing skids as she brought the Black Hawk into a hover that required constant adjustments to maintain stability in the confined space. Chen's team moved with the disciplined efficiency of Marines, who understood that extraction windows measured survival in seconds rather than minutes. 2 wounded Marines were carried toward the helicopter by their teammates, their injuries serious enough to require immediate medical attention but not severe enough to prevent their movement to the aircraft. The first bursts of enemy fire erupted from positions along the canyon rim as hostile forces realized that an American rescue operation was in progress. Muzzle flashes sparked like deadly fireflies against the darkness, their bullets ricocheting off rock surfaces with metallic whines that echoed through the confined space like angry hornets seeking targets. Sarah engaged the Black Hawk's defensive systems as enemy fire intensified, the aircraft's mounted weapons returning suppressive fire that forced hostile gunners to seek cover rather than maintain accurate aim at the extraction site. The weapon systems had been designed for exactly this type of close-quarters combat, providing covering fire that protected rescue operations without escalating to full-scale warfare. "Phoenix 1, we're taking heavy fire from multiple positions," Chen reported as her Marines loaded wounded teammates into the aircraft's passenger compartment. "Enemy forces are attempting to flank our position from the northeast approach. We need immediate extraction." The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as enemy forces realized that allowing the American helicopter to escape would mean losing their primary leverage against future rescue operations. Rocket-propelled grenades began impacting around the landing zone, their explosions showering the area with rock fragments that could damage aircraft systems or injure personnel during the extraction process. Sarah's training in extreme flight operations proved crucial as she maneuvered the Black Hawk through the increasingly dangerous environment, using terrain features to shield the aircraft from enemy fire while maintaining position for the extraction. The enhanced navigation systems provided real-time updates on safe flight paths that could take them out of the canyon system without exposing the aircraft to concentrated enemy fire. The final Marine reached the aircraft as Sarah detected the distinctive radar signature of surface-to-air missiles being activated in positions surrounding the canyon. The SA-24 systems were sophisticated enough to track low-flying helicopters, but their effectiveness was reduced by the terrain masking that Sarah had used to reach the extraction site. "Phoenix 1, all personnel aboard," Chen announced as she secured the passenger compartment and prepared for immediate departure. "Team ready for extraction. 2 wounded, requiring urgent medical attention." Sarah pulled collective and added power, lifting the Black Hawk out of the landing zone as enemy fire reached crescendo intensity that turned the canyon into a lethal shooting gallery. The aircraft's armor plating deflected small arms fire that would have been devastating to unprotected helicopters, while the noise reduction modifications made it difficult for enemy forces to track their movement by sound alone. The escape route required navigation through canyon passages that tested the limits of both aircraft performance and pilot skill, with walls so close that rotor clearance measured in feet rather than yards. Sarah's understanding of the terrain proved invaluable as she guided the helicopter through passages that she'd memorized during months of studying satellite imagery and topographical maps. The first surface-to-air missile launch appeared as a bright streak against the darkness, its heat-seeking guidance system tracking the Black Hawk's engine signature as Sarah maneuvered through the narrow canyon system. The enhanced countermeasures deployed automatically, filling the air with thermal chaff designed to confuse missile guidance systems and protect the aircraft from heat-seeking weapons. Sarah's evasive maneuvering combined terrain masking with aggressive flight tactics that pushed the modified Black Hawk through performance envelopes that would have been impossible for standard aircraft. The enhanced systems responded flawlessly to demands that exceeded normal operational parameters, demonstrating the value of modifications that others had dismissed as unnecessary complexity. The second missile launch came from a different angle, confirming Sarah's assessment that enemy forces had positioned multiple launcher teams to create overlapping fields of fire that could engage aircraft regardless of their escape route. The tactical situation required split-second decisions that combined technical knowledge with combat instincts that Sarah had developed through her comprehensive preparation. Chen's medical assessment of her wounded Marines provided crucial information about the urgency of reaching medical facilities, her reports indicating that both injuries were serious but not immediately life-threatening if proper treatment could be provided within the next hour. The information influenced Sarah's route planning, balancing speed against stealth and calculating the optimal path back to base. The canyon exit opened into broader terrain that provided more maneuvering room but also exposed the Black Hawk to longer-range enemy weapons that could engage targets at greater distances. Sarah maintained low altitude to avoid radar detection, while using terrain features to mask the aircraft's movement from ground-based observers who might guide additional missile attacks. Her radio crackled with frantic transmissions from Falcon Ridge as Base Command realized that an unauthorized rescue operation was not only in progress but was apparently succeeding against impossible odds. Colonel Webb's voice cut through the communications chaos with authority that carried across the desert like thunder. Phoenix 1, this is Falcon Ridge Base Commander. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Acknowledge this transmission and comply with direct orders from Base Command. Sarah maintained radio silence, focusing on the navigation requirements that would get Chen's team safely back to medical treatment while avoiding additional enemy contact that could compromise the mission's success. The base's radar systems were tracking her movement, but she calculated that reaching friendly airspace would take less time than organizing an effective intervention to stop her unauthorized operation. The lights of Falcon Ridge appeared on the horizon like a constellation of hope against the desert darkness, marking the end of a flight that had officially never happened, but had saved 4 Marines who would have died, while bureaucrats debated authorization for missions that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. Sarah had proven that sometimes the right person with the right preparation could accomplish what entire command structures couldn't authorize. The Black Hawk touched down on Falcon Ridge's medical pad at 0247 hours, its modified rotors spinning down as emergency medical personnel rushed toward the aircraft with stretchers and trauma equipment that would determine whether Chen's wounded Marines survived their injuries. Sarah shut down the enhanced systems methodically, each switch and control reflecting the successful completion of a mission that officially hadn't occurred but had saved lives that everyone agreed were worth saving. Colonel Webb stood at the edge of the landing pad surrounded by base security personnel, his expression unreadable in the harsh glare of emergency lighting that illuminated the scene like a military tribunal convened in the middle of the night. Behind him, Sarah could see the faces of pilots who had watched her departure with disbelief and were witnessing her return with expressions that ranged from admiration to concern about the consequences she would face. Chen emerged from the aircraft supporting one of her wounded Marines, her professional demeanor intact despite 18 hours of combat that had tested the limits of Marine Corps training and endurance. She approached Webb with the bearing of a soldier reporting mission completion, her voice carrying across the landing pad with authority that commanded attention from everyone present. "Sir, Marine Reconnaissance Team Bravo reporting successful extraction from hostile territory," Chen announced, her tone reflecting the satisfaction of professional military personnel who had accomplished their mission despite impossible circumstances. 2 wounded requiring immediate medical attention but all team members alive and accounted for. Webb's acknowledgement reflected the complex emotions of a commander who had watched one of his pilots violate direct orders to accomplish a mission that he couldn't officially authorize but personally supported. "Sergeant Chen, get your people to medical immediately. We'll debrief the mission details after everyone receives proper treatment." The medical teams worked with practiced efficiency to stabilize Chen's wounded Marines, their professional competence providing the critical care that would determine long-term recovery prospects for injuries sustained during extended combat operations. Sarah watched from beside her aircraft as stretchers carried the Marines toward the base hospital, knowing that their survival justified every regulation she had violated during the unauthorized rescue. Captain Morrison approached Sarah with an expression that reflected the profound shift in perception that her successful mission had created among pilots who had dismissed her capabilities for months. "Reynolds, how did you navigate those canyon passages in zero visibility? The terrain masking alone should have made instrument flight impossible." Sarah's explanation of the enhanced navigation systems began a technical discussion that gradually drew other pilots into a circle around the modified Black Hawk, their questions reflecting genuine curiosity about capabilities they had never considered relevant to military aviation. The sophisticated terrain-following radar, the noise reduction modifications, and the enhanced defensive systems were no longer abstract technical improvements, but proven capabilities that had enabled mission success. Lieutenant Patterson examined the aircraft's defensive armament with the interest of someone who was reconsidering fundamental assumptions about what constituted essential pilot qualifications. These countermeasure systems are more advanced than anything we've trained with. How did you know they would be effective against SA-24 missiles? The weapons systems discussion revealed the depth of Sarah's preparation for scenarios that others had never seriously considered. Her knowledge extending beyond technical specifications to tactical applications that required understanding both enemy capabilities and friendly system limitations. Her answers demonstrated expertise that couldn't be acquired through standard training programs or conventional military education. Captain Williams approached with questions about flight performance parameters that reflected growing recognition of Sarah's unique qualifications for extreme operations. Reynolds, the fuel consumption data suggests you were operating at performance levels that shouldn't be sustainable for extended periods. How did the enhanced systems affect aircraft handling characteristics? Sarah's technical explanations gradually shifted the conversation from questioning her unauthorized actions to understanding the capabilities that had made mission success possible. The assembled pilots began to recognize that her mechanical background and methodical preparation had created expertise that complemented rather than competed with traditional aviation skills. Colonel Webb interrupted the technical discussion with an announcement that reflected the administrative reality of unauthorized military operations, regardless of their humanitarian motivation or successful outcome. Captain Reynolds, report to my office at 0800 hours for disciplinary review. Your actions tonight violated direct orders from Central Command and created potential international incidents that could affect strategic military relationships. The disciplinary implications were serious and immediate, as Webb outlined during a preliminary discussion that Sarah overheard while maintenance crews examined her aircraft for damage assessment. Court-martial proceedings were possible, reduction in rank was probable, and a dismissal from military service remained a distinct possibility depending on how senior commanders chose to respond to her unauthorized operation. Chief Master Sergeant Davis approached Sarah with maintenance reports that documented the successful performance of aircraft modifications under extreme operational conditions, his professional assessment providing technical validation for capabilities that had been theoretical until tested in actual combat. Captain, the aircraft performed flawlessly during the mission. Every enhanced system functioned within normal parameters despite stress levels that exceeded design specifications. The maintenance assessment became part of a broader evaluation of Sarah's mission that gradually drew attention from personnel throughout the base, creating unofficial recognition of achievement that contrasted sharply with the official disapproval she faced for violating orders. Her technical competence had enabled mission success, but her insubordination had created administrative problems that couldn't be ignored. Marine Sergeant Chen provided her own assessment of the rescue operation during a preliminary debrief that emphasized the professionalism and skill that had characterized Sarah's performance under extreme pressure. Captain Reynolds displayed exceptional judgment and technical competence throughout the extraction. Her aircraft handling in confined terrain was superior to anything I've witnessed during my military career. The Marine Corps perspective on the rescue operation differed significantly from Air Force concerns about regulatory compliance and chain of command authority, creating institutional tension about how to evaluate unauthorized actions that had achieved humanitarian objectives through violation of explicit orders. Chen's team had been saved by someone willing to ignore regulations in favor of moral imperatives. Intelligence Officer Major Johnson approached Sarah with preliminary assessment reports that documented the strategic significance of Chen's successful extraction, her analysis revealing that the Marine reconnaissance mission had gathered intelligence crucial to ongoing counterterrorism operations. Captain Reynolds, the information that Chen's team collected will be instrumental in disrupting terrorist activities that could have affected American interests throughout the region. The strategic implications of the rescue mission extended beyond humanitarian considerations to operational effectiveness that couldn't be achieved through conventional channels, creating additional complexity in evaluating Sarah's unauthorized actions. Her violation of orders had enabled intelligence gathering that served broader military objectives, complicating disciplinary assessments that focused solely on regulatory compliance. As dawn approached over the Nevada desert, Sarah found herself at the center of discussions that would determine not only her personal military future, but also institutional attitudes toward innovation, initiative, and the balance between following orders and accomplishing missions that served larger purposes. Her unauthorized rescue had succeeded in ways that challenged conventional thinking about military effectiveness and individual responsibility. The base hospital reported successful treatment of Chen's wounded Marines, confirming that both injuries were serious but not life-threatening, with proper medical care that might not have been available if bureaucratic obstacles had delayed rescue operations beyond the critical treatment window. Sarah's decision to violate orders had literally saved lives that would have been lost to administrative caution. The sun rose over Falcon Ridge Air Base on a day that would either mark the end of Sarah's military career or the beginning of recognition that exceptional circumstances sometimes required exceptional responses from personnel willing to risk everything for principles that transcended regulations. Her unauthorized mission had proven that technical competence and moral courage could accomplish what conventional wisdom deemed impossible. 6 months after the unauthorized rescue that had saved Chen's Marines, Captain Sarah Reynolds stood before the packed auditorium at the National Defense University, her uniform bearing the new insignia of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the legendary Night Stalkers, who specialized in missions that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. The transformation from dismissed transport pilot to elite special operations aviator represented more than personal vindication. It symbolized a fundamental shift in how the military evaluated unconventional qualifications and innovative thinking. The court-martial proceedings that followed her unauthorized rescue had lasted 3 weeks, generating media attention that forced senior military leaders to confront uncomfortable questions about institutional bias and the effectiveness of conventional command structures. Sarah's defense had been simple and devastating. She had saved 4 American lives using capabilities that the military possessed but refused to utilize because they didn't fit traditional models of pilot qualifications and mission authorization. The testimony of Chen's Marines had provided powerful evidence that Sarah's technical expertise and unconventional preparation had enabled mission success where conventional approaches would have failed. Sergeant Chen herself had testified that Sarah's aircraft handling in extreme terrain exceeded anything she had witnessed during a decade of military service that included deployments with elite special operations units. The court's final verdict had reflected the impossible position of military justice systems confronting unauthorized actions that achieved objectives that authorized operations couldn't accomplish. Sarah was found guilty of violating direct orders but received no punishment beyond a formal reprimand, with the court noting that her actions had served broader military interests despite violating specific regulations. The reprimand had lasted exactly 2 weeks before General Patricia Hayes from Special Operations Command had personally recruited Sarah for assignment to the 160th Regiment. Recognizing that her unique combination of technical expertise and operational capability represented exactly the type of innovative thinking that special operations required, her transfer had been accompanied by promotion to major, acknowledging skills that conventional evaluation systems had failed to recognize. Colonel Webb had been among the first to congratulate Sarah on her new assignment, his attitude toward her capabilities transformed by witnessing firsthand the effectiveness of preparation and innovation that he had previously dismissed as irrelevant to modern aviation. Reynolds: I spent 18 months underestimating your potential, because I was looking for traditional qualifications instead of recognizing unique capabilities, he had admitted during her departure ceremony. The 160th Regiment's training program had been designed to push pilot capabilities beyond conventional limits, but Sarah had discovered that her years of unofficial preparation had given her advantages that even elite special operations training couldn't replicate overnight. Her mechanical background, her methodical approach to problem-solving, and her comprehensive understanding of aircraft systems had made her valuable to units that specialized in missions requiring exceptional technical competence. Captain Morrison, now serving as Sarah's deputy commander in the Special Operations Squadron, had undergone his own transformation in understanding what constituted essential pilot qualifications. I used to think that natural flying ability was the most important qualification for military aviation, he reflected during a mission debrief. Working with Sarah taught me that preparation and technical knowledge can be more valuable than instincts when missions push beyond normal operational parameters. The ripple effects of Sarah's successful rescue had influenced personnel policies throughout the Air Force, creating new evaluation criteria that recognized unconventional backgrounds and alternative paths to aviation excellence. Her example had encouraged other enlisted personnel to pursue pilot training, while her technical approach to flying had become part of advanced training curricula at multiple military schools. Lieutenant Thompson, inspired by Sarah's example, had completed advanced technical training that combined mechanical expertise with flight operations, recognizing that understanding aircraft systems could provide operational advantages that traditional pilot training didn't emphasize. His transformation from dismissive colleague to enthusiastic supporter reflected broader institutional changes in how the military evaluated diverse qualifications. The enhanced aircraft modifications that Sarah had utilized during her unauthorized rescue had been standardized across Special Operations Aviation units, with her technical insights contributing to improvements that enhanced mission effectiveness for elite units operating in challenging environments. Her mechanical background had enabled modifications that pilots without technical training couldn't have conceived or implemented. Captain Williams, now commanding a transport squadron, had implemented training programs based on Sarah's methodical approach to mission preparation, recognizing that her comprehensive preparation techniques could benefit pilots regardless of their operational specialties. His squadron's performance metrics had improved significantly after adopting planning methods that Sarah had developed through years of unofficial study. The international recognition of Sarah's rescue mission had extended beyond American military circles to allied nations that recognized the value of innovative thinking in modern military operations. NATO forces had requested briefings on her tactical approaches, while other air forces had studied her technical modifications as models for enhancing special operations capabilities. Marine Sergeant Chen, now promoted to Staff Sergeant and serving as an instructor at the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, frequently used Sarah's rescue as a case study in innovative problem-solving and the importance of technical competence in extreme operations. Her classes emphasized that survival often depended on personnel who thought beyond conventional limitations. The psychological transformation within Falcon Ridge Air Base had been perhaps the most significant long-term effect of Sarah's unauthorized mission. Pilots who had previously dismissed technical expertise as secondary to flying instincts had begun pursuing additional training that combined mechanical knowledge with operational skills, recognizing that modern aviation required broader competencies than traditional programs provided. Chief Master Sergeant Davis had been promoted to base-level positions where he could influence training programs throughout the Air Force, implementing changes that recognized the value of enlisted experience and technical expertise in developing well-rounded aviation professionals. His reforms had created pathways for personnel with non-traditional backgrounds to contribute their unique perspectives to military aviation. The research and development implications of Sarah's mission had influenced aircraft modification programs across multiple military branches, with her successful demonstration of enhanced navigation and stealth systems leading to accelerated development of capabilities that had previously been considered experimental. Her practical testing under combat conditions had provided validation for technologies that might otherwise have remained theoretical. The recruitment and retention effects had been equally significant, with the Air Force experiencing increased applications from technically qualified personnel who had previously assumed that their backgrounds would be dismissed in favor of traditional aviation candidates. Sarah's example had demonstrated that diverse qualifications could enhance rather than detract from military effectiveness. The training revolution initiated by Sarah's success had created new instructional programs that emphasized technical understanding alongside flying skills, producing pilots who understood their aircraft as systems rather than just operational tools. These programs had improved mission success rates across multiple operational specialties by creating more technically competent aviators. The institutional memory of Sarah's unauthorized rescue had become part of military culture, referenced in discussions about innovation, initiative, and the balance between following orders and serving larger purposes. Her example had influenced policies that encouraged creative problem-solving while maintaining necessary discipline and chain-of-command authority. The legacy of the mission extended to ongoing operations where Sarah's techniques and technical approaches had been applied to rescue operations throughout conflict zones worldwide. Her methodical preparation and innovative thinking had become standard practices for special operations units that specialized in missions requiring exceptional technical competence and tactical innovation. As Sarah concluded her presentation to the assembled military leaders and international observers, she reflected on the journey from dismissed transport pilot to recognized expert in special operations aviation. Her experience had demonstrated that institutional biases could be overcome through competence and determination, while individual initiative could achieve objectives that conventional systems couldn't accomplish. The questions from the audience reflected genuine curiosity about replicating her success rather than skepticism about her qualifications. representing a fundamental shift in how military institutions evaluated unconventional approaches to traditional challenges. Sarah's transformation had influenced not only her own career, but the broader understanding of what constituted valuable military expertise in an era requiring innovative solutions to complex operational challenges. 2 years had passed since Sarah's unauthorized rescue transformed her from overlooked transport pilot to elite special operations aviator, and now she stood in the pre-dawn darkness of forward operating base Tempest in eastern Afghanistan, watching her hand-picked team prepare for a mission that would test everything she had learned about leading unconventional personnel in impossible circumstances. The intelligence briefing had been stark in its assessment. A joint American-British Special Forces team was trapped in a Taliban stronghold, deep in the Hindu Kush Mountains, surrounded by enemy forces and facing annihilation unless someone could reach them within the next 8 hours. Major Sarah Reynolds commanded the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment's most specialized unit, a squadron of pilots and aircrew who had been selected not for their traditional qualifications, but for their ability to think beyond conventional limitations and accomplish missions that defeated standard operational approaches. Her team included former enlisted mechanics who understood aircraft systems at levels that academy graduates couldn't match, immigrant pilots whose multilingual capabilities enabled communication in complex international operations, and technical specialists whose backgrounds in fields ranging from computer science to mountain climbing provided capabilities that traditional military training couldn't replicate. Captain Elena Vasquez, Sarah's deputy commander, exemplified the type of unconventional expertise that had become the squadron's hallmark. Elena had served as an aircraft mechanic for 6 years before completing pilot training, a technical background enabling her to modify aircraft systems in real time during missions that pushed equipment beyond design parameters. Her ability to diagnose and repair complex mechanical problems while flying in hostile territory had saved multiple missions when conventional pilots would have been forced to abort operations. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Thompson represented another category of unconventional excellence that Sarah actively recruited for her unit. Thompson had immigrated from Somalia as a teenager, his childhood experience with extreme poverty and political violence providing perspectives on survival and resourcefulness that couldn't be taught in military schools. His fluency in 6 languages and intimate understanding of tribal dynamics in conflict zones made him invaluable for missions requiring cultural sensitivity and local cooperation. Staff Sergeant Rosa Martinez brought technical expertise that reflected the changing nature of modern military operations, her background in computer systems and electronic warfare providing capabilities that traditional aviation units couldn't match. Rosa had developed modifications to aircraft navigation and communication systems that enabled operations in environments where conventional electronics failed, her innovations becoming standard equipment for special operations units worldwide. The mission briefing revealed complexities that would have overwhelmed conventional rescue operations, with the trapped Special Forces team located in terrain that required precision flying through mountain passes defended by sophisticated anti-aircraft systems. Intelligence indicated the Taliban forces had acquired advanced surface-to-air missiles and were using the trapped team as bait to draw American aircraft into prepared ambush zones. Sarah's approach to mission planning reflected lessons learned from her own experience with institutional bias and the importance of utilizing unconventional capabilities when conventional approaches failed. Rather than relying on standard operational procedures that had proven inadequate for extreme conditions, she encouraged her team to develop innovative solutions that combined technical expertise with tactical creativity. The aircraft modifications for this mission pushed the boundaries of what conventional military aviation considered possible, with Sarah's team implementing real-time upgrades to navigation systems, defensive capabilities, and communication equipment that would enable operations in conditions that would defeat standard aircraft. Elena's mechanical expertise had been crucial in developing engine modifications that provided additional power for high-altitude operations while maintaining stealth characteristics essential for avoiding detection. Captain David Chen, the newest member of Sarah's team and nephew of the Marine sergeant whose rescue had launched Sarah's transformation, brought perspectives shaped by growing up in a military family that understood both the importance of following orders and the necessity of individual initiative when regulations conflicted with moral imperatives. His technical education in aerospace engineering provided capabilities that complemented the practical experience of Sarah's other team members. The psychological preparation for extreme missions had become one of Sarah's specialties, recognizing that unconventional operations required mental resilience that went beyond standard military training. Her team participated in scenario planning that anticipated equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and tactical situations that might require split-second decisions with life or death consequences. The international implications of this rescue operation extended beyond American military interests to allied relationships that could be affected by mission success or failure. The trapped British Special Forces personnel represented commitments to coalition partners that influenced strategic relationships throughout the region, creating political pressures that demanded mission success despite operational challenges that conventional wisdom deemed insurmountable. Sarah's leadership style had evolved from her own experience with being underestimated and dismissed, creating an environment where unconventional thinking was encouraged rather than discouraged. She actively sought personnel whose backgrounds and perspectives differed from traditional military models, recognizing that diversity of experience often provided solutions to problems that homogeneous thinking couldn't solve. The tactical innovation that characterized Sarah's squadron extended to training programs that prepared personnel for scenarios that weren't covered in standard military curricula. Her pilots practiced flying damaged aircraft, navigating without electronic systems, and communicating across language barriers that could affect mission success in multinational operations. The equipment development that had emerged from Sarah's technical approach to aviation had influenced military procurement policies throughout the Department of Defense, with her successful demonstrations of enhanced capabilities leading to accelerated development of systems that improved mission effectiveness across multiple operational specialties. Her squadron served as a testing ground for innovations that traditional acquisition processes would have required years to evaluate and implement. The mentorship responsibilities that came with Sarah's new position extended beyond her immediate squadron to influence throughout the special operations community, with her example encouraging other units to reconsider their evaluation criteria for personnel selection and mission planning. Her success had created opportunities for other unconventional personnel to demonstrate capabilities that might otherwise have been overlooked. The strategic thinking that Sarah brought to special operations planning reflected her comprehensive understanding of how technical capabilities could be leveraged to achieve tactical advantages that conventional approaches couldn't provide. Her background in maintenance and systems engineering enabled her to identify opportunities for innovation that pilots without technical training might not recognize. The cultural transformation that Sarah's leadership had created within her squadron represented a fundamental shift from hierarchical decision-making to collaborative problem-solving that utilized the diverse expertise of all team members regardless of their rank or traditional qualifications. This approach had improved mission success rates while creating job satisfaction levels that exceeded military norms. The research and development partnerships that had emerged from Sarah's squadron's innovations included collaborations with civilian technology companies and academic institutions that recognized the military applications of their specialized knowledge. These relationships had accelerated development of capabilities that enhanced American military effectiveness while creating economic opportunities in related industries. The intelligence-gathering capabilities that Sarah's team had developed through their multilingual skills and cultural understanding provided information that traditional intelligence sources couldn't access, improving operational planning for missions throughout the region. Their ability to communicate with local populations and understand cultural dynamics had proven invaluable for gathering information about enemy capabilities and intentions. As Sarah's team completed their final preparations for the rescue mission that would test their unconventional capabilities against seemingly impossible odds, she reflected on the transformation that had begun with her own unauthorized rescue of Chen's Marines. Her experience had demonstrated that individual initiative could achieve objectives that institutional processes couldn't accomplish, while her subsequent leadership had proven that diverse teams could consistently outperform homogeneous units when missions required innovative thinking and adaptive problem-solving. The legacy of Sarah's transformation extended beyond her personal career to influence military culture throughout the special operations community, creating acceptance for unconventional approaches that had previously been dismissed as incompatible with military discipline. Her example had encouraged other leaders to recognize that diverse backgrounds and alternative perspectives could enhance rather than threaten military effectiveness. The mission ahead would test whether the principles that had guided Sarah's own transformation could be scaled to larger operations, requiring coordination among multiple unconventional personnel facing extreme challenges. The trapped Special Forces team was counting on someone to prove once again that impossible wasn't permanent when the right people, with the right preparation, were willing to risk everything for principles that transcended conventional limitations. The rotor blades began spinning as Sarah's squadron prepared to launch into the mountain darkness, carrying innovations and capabilities that had emerged from one transport pilot's refusal to accept that her background disqualified her from missions that mattered. Their success would determine not only the fate of the trapped soldiers, but also the future of military approaches to personnel selection, mission planning, and the balance between following orders and serving larger purposes that define military service at its highest levels. The flight into the Hindu Kush began at 0330 hours, with Sarah's squadron lifting off into darkness so complete that even enhanced night vision equipment struggled to penetrate the mountain shadows that concealed both friendly forces and enemy positions throughout the treacherous terrain ahead. The modified Blackhawks flew in formation through valleys that had witnessed centuries of warfare, their enhanced navigation systems mapping flight paths through passes that conventional aircraft couldn't safely navigate even in daylight conditions. Captain Vasquez piloted the lead aircraft alongside Sarah, her mechanical expertise proving crucial as they encountered atmospheric conditions that pushed aircraft performance beyond normal operational parameters. The thin air at high altitude required constant adjustments to engine settings and rotor pitch, modifications that Elena implemented in real time while maintaining formation discipline that kept the squadron together through terrain that could separate aircraft beyond mutual support range. The intelligence updates that reached Sarah's formation during the flight painted an increasingly desperate picture of the trapped Special Forces team's situation, with enemy forces having moved heavy weapons into positions that could engage rescue aircraft at the narrow landing zones where extraction might be possible. The Taliban fighters had apparently learned from previous rescue operations, positioning themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that could destroy helicopters attempting to reach the surrounded soldiers. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson's linguistic capabilities became essential as the squadron approached the operational area, his ability to monitor enemy communications providing real-time intelligence about Taliban tactical movements and weapon deployments that could affect mission success. The intercepted radio traffic revealed sophisticated coordination among enemy units, suggesting that American forces were facing organized military opposition rather than the improvised resistance that characterized many Taliban operations. The terrain analysis that Sarah had conducted during mission planning proved accurate but incomplete, as the actual mountain landscape presented challenges that satellite imagery couldn't fully capture. The valleys were narrower than anticipated, the ridge lines higher and more jagged, and the wind patterns more turbulent than weather forecasts had predicted. These conditions would have forced conventional rescue operations to abort, but Sarah's team had prepared for exactly these contingencies. Staff Sergeant Martinez's electronic warfare capabilities provided crucial protection as the squadron penetrated deeper into hostile territory, her systems detecting and jamming enemy communications that might coordinate attacks against the rescue formation. The sophisticated countermeasures that Rosa had developed were being tested under combat conditions that would determine their effectiveness against adversaries who had studied American rescue tactics and developed countermeasures of their own. The first surface-to-air missile launch appeared as a bright streak against the mountain darkness, its heat-seeking guidance system tracking the lead helicopter as Sarah maneuvered through evasive patterns that combined terrain masking with defensive countermeasures designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. The missile impacted against a cliff face 50 meters from her aircraft, its explosion illuminating the landscape with brilliant orange light that revealed enemy positions scattered throughout the surrounding heights. Captain Chen's aerospace engineering background proved invaluable, as multiple missile launches created a complex threat environment that required split-second calculations of optimal evasive routes through terrain that offered limited maneuvering room. His analysis of missile flight characteristics and guidance system limitations enabled the squadron to navigate through defensive fire that would have overwhelmed pilots without technical understanding of the weapons being used against them. The communication with the trapped Special Forces team revealed the full complexity of their tactical situation, with British and American soldiers positioned in a defensible location that provided excellent cover but limited options for helicopter extraction. The team's commanding officer, Major James Hartley of the British Special Air Service, reported that his forces were surrounded by approximately 300 Taliban fighters, equipped with heavy weapons, that could engage aircraft attempting to reach the extraction site. Sarah's tactical decision to split her squadron into multiple elements reflected lessons learned from her own unauthorized rescue, recognizing that conventional approaches would be anticipated and countered by enemy forces who had prepared specifically to defeat American rescue operations. Elena would lead 2 aircraft in a diversionary attack that would draw enemy attention away from the actual extraction site, while Sarah approached the landing zone from an unexpected direction that utilized terrain masking to avoid detection. The coordination between squadron elements required precise timing and constant communication despite electronic jamming that threatened to disrupt the coordination essential for mission success. Thompson's ability to maintain contact using multiple frequency bands and communication protocols ensured that all aircraft remained informed of tactical developments that could affect their individual missions within the larger operation. The diversionary attack initiated by Elena's element achieved its tactical objective by drawing enemy fire away from Sarah's approach route, but the intensity of Taliban response revealed defensive preparations that exceeded intelligence estimates. The enemy forces had positioned multiple weapon systems in overlapping patterns that created deadly crossfire zones around potential landing sites, forcing Elena's aircraft to operate under sustained fire that tested both pilot skill and aircraft survivability. Rose's electronic countermeasures proved decisive in protecting the squadron from guided weapons that could have destroyed multiple aircraft during the complex tactical maneuvers required to reach the extraction site. Her real-time modifications to defensive systems provided protection against threats that conventional countermeasures couldn't defeat, demonstrating the value of technical innovation under extreme combat conditions. The extraction site presented challenges that pushed the limits of helicopter operations in mountainous terrain, with the landing zone located on a narrow ridge that provided barely sufficient space for aircraft operations while offering minimal protection from enemy fire. Sarah's approach required precision flying that utilized every meter of available space while maintaining aircraft stability in wind conditions that could force aircraft into fatal contact with surrounding rock formations. Major Hartley's ground coordination proved essential as Sarah maneuvered her aircraft into the confined landing zone, his tactical expertise enabling rapid loading of wounded personnel while maintaining defensive fire that suppressed enemy positions threatening the extraction. The British officer's calm professionalism under extreme pressure reflected the type of leadership that made successful rescue operations possible, even under seemingly impossible conditions. The wounded soldiers being evacuated included injuries that required immediate medical attention, creating time pressures that influenced every aspect of the extraction operation. Captain Chen's first aid training, which exceeded standard pilot qualifications, proved crucial in stabilizing casualties during the flight back to medical facilities that could provide the specialized treatment necessary for survival. The tactical withdrawal from the extraction site required navigation through terrain that enemy forces had studied and prepared to defend, with Taliban fighters positioned along multiple egress routes that could engage departing aircraft. Sarah's route planning utilized her comprehensive understanding of mountain flying to identify escape paths that enemies couldn't effectively cover with their available weapon systems. Elena's diversionary element continued to engage enemy positions during the extraction phase, their sustained combat providing the distraction necessary for Sarah's successful departure with the rescued soldiers. The coordination between squadron elements demonstrated the effectiveness of training programs that emphasized teamwork and mutual support rather than individual heroics. The flight back to forward operating base Tempest took the squadron through mountain passes that remained dangerous despite successful completion of the primary extraction mission, with enemy forces potentially positioned along withdrawal routes that could threaten aircraft loaded with wounded personnel. The enhanced navigation systems that had enabled the initial penetration proved equally valuable for finding safe passage through terrain that conventional navigation couldn't reliably map. The medical treatment of evacuated personnel began during the return flight, with Sarah's team providing emergency care that stabilized critical injuries until professional medical facilities could provide definitive treatment. The successful rescue of all trapped personnel represented validation of unconventional approaches that combined technical innovation with tactical creativity to achieve objectives that conventional methods couldn't accomplish. The mission's conclusion at Forward Operating Base Tempest marked another successful demonstration of capabilities that had emerged from Sarah's transformation from dismissed transport pilot to elite special operations commander. Her squadron had proven once again that diverse backgrounds and innovative thinking could consistently achieve mission success when conventional approaches failed, establishing precedents that would influence special operations doctrine for years to come. The debriefing session at Forward Operating Base Tempest drew senior commanders from across Central Command, their presence reflecting recognition that Sarah's squadron had achieved something unprecedented in the annals of special operations aviation. General Patricia Hayes, now commanding all special operations forces in the region, studied the mission reports with the intensity of someone who understood that tactical innovations could reshape military doctrine for decades to come. Major Hartley's account of the rescue operation provided validation from the perspective of elite soldiers who had witnessed exceptional aviation performance under the most challenging conditions imaginable. "I've participated in rescue operations with every major special operations unit in NATO," the British officer told the assembled commanders. Major Reynolds and her team demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything I've experienced during 15 years of military service. The tactical analysis revealed that Sarah's squadron had accomplished the mission with 0 casualties while operating in conditions that conventional assessment had deemed unsurvivable, their success attributed to the combination of technical innovation and unconventional personnel selection that had become the unit's defining characteristics. The enemy forces they had defeated represented some of the most sophisticated anti-aircraft capabilities that Taliban fighters had ever deployed. Colonel Webb, now serving as Deputy Commander for Air Force Special Operations, reflected on his transformation from skeptical wing commander to ardent supporter of unconventional approaches to military aviation. 2 years ago, I would have dismissed Reynolds as unqualified for standard transport missions, he admitted to the assembled officers. Today, her methods are being studied by every elite unit in the American military. The strategic implications of the rescue extended beyond immediate tactical success to demonstrate capabilities that could influence American military planning throughout regions, where conventional forces faced asymmetric threats from adversaries who had studied and adapted to traditional operational methods. Sarah's approaches represented solutions to tactical problems that had previously been considered unsolvable. Captain Vasquez's technical innovations during the mission had provided real-time solutions to mechanical problems that would have forced conventional aircraft to abort their missions. Her ability to modify systems under combat conditions representing exactly the type of capability that modern military operations required. Her background as an enlisted mechanic had proven more valuable than traditional officer training for the extreme conditions they had faced. The international recognition of Sarah's methods had attracted attention from allied nations seeking to replicate her success with unconventional personnel and innovative tactics, creating opportunities for military cooperation that enhanced American strategic relationships while demonstrating the effectiveness of diversity and inclusion in military operations. NATO forces had requested detailed briefings on her selection and training methods. The wounded soldiers evacuated during the mission made complete recoveries, their survival representing the ultimate validation of decisions to risk everything for principles that transcended regulations and conventional wisdom. The successful rescue had saved not only individual lives but also the intelligence they had gathered, information that proved crucial for disrupting terrorist networks throughout the region. Staff Sergeant Martinez's electronic warfare innovations had been so successful that her techniques were being incorporated into training programs for special operations units worldwide, her civilian education in computer systems providing military applications that traditional training couldn't develop. The defense industry had begun adapting her modifications for broader military use. The recruitment and retention effects of Sarah's success had transformed personnel policies throughout the special operations community, with military leaders actively seeking candidates whose unconventional backgrounds provided capabilities that traditional evaluation criteria couldn't identify. Her example had created pathways for personnel who might otherwise have been overlooked. The training revolution initiated by Sarah's methods had produced measurable improvements in mission success rates across multiple operational specialties, proving that her approaches could be scaled beyond individual units to influence broader military effectiveness. Her techniques were being taught at every major military aviation school in the country. As Sarah stood before the assembled commanders, she realized that her journey from dismissed transport pilot to recognized innovator had created changes that extended far beyond her personal career to influence how the military identified, developed, and utilized human potential in an era requiring creative solutions to complex challenges. Her unauthorized rescue of Chen's Marines had initiated transformations that were reshaping American military culture. The future of special operations aviation would be built upon principles that Sarah had proven through determination and competence, demonstrating that exceptional individuals could achieve extraordinary results when institutions were willing to recognize and support unconventional excellence. The radio crackled with an urgent transmission that would test Sarah's squadron one final time. "Phoenix Squadron, we have a developing situation. Multiple aircraft down in the Karakoram range. Weather window closing in 2 hours. All conventional rescue assets grounded due to extreme conditions." Sarah looked at her team. Elena, checking engine modifications. Thompson studying terrain maps in 3 languages. Rosa calibrating electronic systems. Chen calculating impossible flight paths. These were the people others had overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. Now they were the only hope for survival in conditions that defeated every textbook solution. "Sir," Sarah responded, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had defined her transformation from invisible logistics specialist to legendary rescue commander. "Phoenix Squadron, ready for immediate deployment. We specialize in impossible missions." As her squadron lifted off into the mountain darkness, Sarah reflected on the journey that had begun with a single unauthorized decision to save Chen's Marines. That night, she had proven that being too small, too methodical, too different wasn't a limitation. It was exactly what made success possible when conventional approaches failed. The helicopters disappeared into the storm, their enhanced systems cutting through conditions that would ground any other aircraft. Behind them, they left a military transformed by the understanding that extraordinary results came from extraordinary people who refused to accept that impossible was permanent. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones everyone overlooks, until the moment comes when only they can save the day. What impossible challenge are you preparing for that others don't see coming? Share your story in the comments below. Your hidden preparation might inspire someone else to push beyond their perceived limitations. If you enjoyed this story of proving doubters wrong, hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe that underestimated often means unstoppable. What would you like to see next? Drop your suggestions below.